My name is Ava Morgan. I'm 29 years old. And this is how I took revenge on the woman who tried to ruin the best thing that ever happened to me. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. A rooftop in downtown Chicago. Golden hour. Casting everything in a soft glow. Laughter echoing over champagne glasses. Our engagement party had been months in the making. Leo had proposed in Paris last fall. And ever since, we'd been planning this celebration with our closest friends. His family, my co-workers, everyone who mattered. Or so I thought. I was wearing this pale champagne dress that shimmered like glass, my hair pinned in a soft wave. Leo looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tailored navy suit, that gentle smile that always made me feel seen. He was talking to my best friend when the toasts began. Then she came up behind me. My mother, always perfectly composed, always watching. She leaned in close as Leo was raising his glass to speak. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to whisper something kind. Instead, she said it with a smirk, clear enough for people nearby to hear. Are you sure he's the best you can do? It hit like a slap across my chest. Conversation stalled. I saw one of my co-workers glance at the ground. Leo froze mid-sentence. I laughed. A sharp, forced thing that didn't belong in that moment. I pretended it was a joke. Made some light-hearted comment about moms being moms. But inside, something cracked wide open. She didn't even blink. Just took a sip of wine like she'd commented on the weather. That was my mother's specialty. Humiliating me in public. Dressed as casual observation. But this time wasn't like all the others. This time, she hadn't just undermined me. She went after Leo, too. The man who had loved me without condition, who believed in me when I barely could. That was the moment I decided. I wasn't going to let her keep poisoning the best things in my life. She had spent my whole life convincing me I wasn't enough. Not pretty enough. Not smart enough. Not worthy of love unless I proved myself endlessly. And now, she was trying to convince the man I love that he wasn't enough either. That night, as the city lights sparkled around us and Leo gently squeezed my hand, I made a promise to myself. She doesn't get to win. Not this time. And that's where the revenge began. Let me take you back. I grew up just outside Milwaukee, in a town where the lawns were manicured, the women wore pearls to the grocery store, and every front porch looked like it belonged in a magazine. Our house was no different. A 5-bedroom colonial with white shutters, a grand staircase, and a dining room we weren't allowed to actually eat in. My mother, Cynthia, designed it all. She was a former pageant queen who married well and treated life like a competition she couldn't afford to lose. Every inch of our world had to be perfect, polished, curated, controlled. My father, he was sweet in the quietest way. He loved jazz and woodworking and spent most of his time either in the garage or behind a newspaper. He rarely spoke up, especially when my mother was in the room. Cynthia led, and he followed. That was the rhythm of our home. And I was the project. From as far back as I can remember, I was being reshaped. My weight was a concern. My laugh was too loud. My posture was lazy. She'd say things like, smile, but not so wide. You show too much gum. Or try on this dress. It hides your thighs. Every compliment was double-edged. Every glance a silent judgment. She called it tough love. Said she was preparing me to be a woman who could land a real man. And that's exactly how she phrased it. A real man. Someone worthy. Someone who would elevate me. and by extension, her, so I tried. God, I tried. I starved myself through high school, stayed up late learning to walk in heels, practiced smiling in the mirror until my cheeks ached. I dated the kinds of men she approved of. A cardiologist named Brett, who once corrected my grammar on a date. An investment banker who barely looked me in the eyes. All Ivy League. All loaded. All emotionally vacant. My mother adored them, and I told myself I should, too. Then I met Leo. We crossed paths at a tech conference in Austin. I was presenting for a startup's marketing division, and he was there as a guest speaker. A soft-spoken engineer from Boston who'd built his own platform from scratch. No flashy suit. No entourage. Just quiet brilliance and this gentle way of speaking that made you lean in. We talked about algorithms, sure, but we also talked about childhood books, favorite breakfast foods, what it felt like to truly be seen. He didn't just ask questions. He listened. And when he looked at me, I felt like I wasn't being measured. There was no Ivy League degree, no old family money, just grit, intelligence, and a heart I didn't know I'd been longing for. I tried to prepare my mother before introducing them, told her he wasn't traditional, that he didn't come from our circle, that she should keep an open mind. She didn't. She called him simple, said he was a phase. Told me he looked like a software repair guy. You can't build a future on feelings, Ava, she warned. Love is cute, but stability is what matters. And by stability, she meant connections, pedigree, someone she could brag about at country club luncheons. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I didn't want her approval. I wanted peace. Leo was that peace. He grounded me in ways I never knew I needed. With him, I could breathe. No makeup, no filters, no mask, just me. When he proposed a year later, in the middle of a bookstore we'd wandered into during a rainy afternoon, I said yes without hesitation. I knew he was it for me, and I knew that would make him a threat to my mother's control. The months leading up to the engagement party were tense. She pretended to be helpful, offered to organize the guest list, suggested tasteful venues. But every interaction was laced with subtle digs, reminders that I was settling, hints that it was all too fast. She said things like, well, as long as you're happy, and he seems nice. I smiled through it, bit my tongue. I wanted one day, just one day, where it could be about love and joy, and starting a life on our terms. But then came the rooftop, the toast, the moment she leaned in and whispered her poison for everyone to hear. And suddenly, it all made sense. She had never cared about my happiness, only about control. And Leo, kind, steady, unshakable Leo, was the one thing she couldn't manipulate. That's when I knew. She didn't just want to undermine our relationship. She wanted to unravel it, to plant the kind of seed that ruins things slowly. She didn't get to do that, not anymore. That night, after the last guest had gone and the rooftop lights had dimmed, I pulled Leo aside. My heart was pounding, my cheeks still flushed from embarrassment. I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head, her voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. Are you sure he's the best you can do? It didn't matter that I'd laughed. It didn't matter that I'd changed the subject. The damage had already been done. I looked up at Leo, bracing for disappointment, for hurt, for the quiet withdrawal I'd seen in so many others after they met my mother. But he didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at me and asked, calm but wounded, why does she hate me so much? I didn't have a good answer. Not then. All I could do was reach for his hand and whisper that it wasn't about him. It never had been. It was about her. About me. About everything I'd never said out loud. I think I expected him to walk away, to need space. But instead he held my hand tighter and said, "She doesn't scare me. I just need to know you're okay." I told him I was. But the truth was, I wasn't. The days that followed brought the real fallout. At first, it came through the grapevine, my aunt calling to check in and accidentally mentioning how my mom had called the party a little amateurish and clearly not professionally designed. Then came the photos my cousin posted, which Cynthia commented on with her usual backhanded grace. A lovely night. Hopefully, the real wedding will be more refined. And then, like clockwork, she delivered the most vicious blow in person. She came over under the guise of returning a cake stand and sat at my kitchen table, like she owned the place. I thought maybe she'd apologize, or at least pretend to regret her words. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Ava, if you marry him, you're choosing mediocrity, and don't expect me to clap for it." The words hit me harder than I expected, not because I believed them, but because I realized, with this painful, crystalline clarity, that my mother didn't love me. Not really. She loved what I represented. She loved molding me, owning me, using me to reflect her curated image of perfection. And Leo, he threatened all of that. He was the mirror that showed how shallow her world really was. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my ribs ached. I curled up on the cold tile floor, makeup streaking down my face, gasping through silent sobs. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I was crying because something in me was breaking open. A belief I'd held onto for too long. The belief that one day, if I just did enough, said the right things, dressed the right way, succeeded big enough, my mother would finally look at me with pride. But she never would, because she didn't want me whole. She wanted me obedient. And when I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror, puffy eyes, trembling lips, mascara smudged like war paint, I felt something I hadn't in years. Resolve. This wasn't going to be petty. I wasn't going to scream or make a scene or try to win her approval back. I didn't want to punish her. I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to feel what it was like to watch everything she looked down on rise higher than she ever imagined. I wanted her to see that the life she mocked, the love she dismissed, was more powerful, more beautiful, and more real than anything in her carefully curated kingdom. That was the night I stopped being her project and started becoming her reckoning. After that night, I pulled back, slowly, deliberately. I stopped answering my mother's daily calls, let her texts pile up unanswered, skipped the usual brunches and charity mixers. I needed space. I needed breath. And Leo, steady, patient Leo, understood without question. We started planning the wedding on our own, quietly. We kept things close, simple, sacred. It felt like a bubble where I could finally hear myself think. But Cynthia didn't like silence. She took my distance as a challenge. The first sign of her pushback came in the form of an email to Leo. Subject line: just some friendly advice. Inside were job listings, corporate finance positions, law firm recruitment forms. One of them even came with a note: "This one has great benefits and upward mobility. You could finally put Ava in the lifestyle she deserves." I was livid. Leo, bless him, laughed it off. But I saw the tightness in his jaw, the quiet hurt, Then came the offer. She called me out of the blue and said, flatly, I'll give you $50. Zero to postpone the wedding. Just take time to think. I'll even help you plan something better when you come to your senses. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But she wasn't done. A week later, Leo's mother called us. Confused, awkward. She told us Cynthia had reached out as a concerned parent and asked her to talk some sense into her son. Said he was in over his head and that Ava needs stability, not a startup. I wanted to scream. It felt like psychological warfare, slow, slicing, and calculated. My therapist gently suggested I go no contact. Leo said, without pressure, that he'd stand by whatever choice I made. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not this time, no. I wanted her to see me rise. I wanted her to witness everything she said I couldn't have, and to choke on her own arrogance. And then the tide shifted. It started with a late-night phone call. Leo whispering excitedly from his office. His startup had just been acquired by a global tech conglomerate. The deal went through at 8 figures. Overnight, he was a multimillionaire. But when I ran to him, beaming, he just smiled and said, I finally feel like I can give you the world. I cried in his arms, not because of the money, but because he meant every word, and meant them humbly. He wanted to elope, said we could disappear to Iceland or Lake Como, or a cabin in the woods. Just us. No drama. No Cynthia. But I said no. I want her there. I told him, I want her to see it. Every second of it. So we didn't run. We went big. I booked the same historic estate my mother had always dreamed of getting married at for her second wedding. The one with the cascading marble staircases and the 18th century rose garden. She'd visited it once during her engagement to husband number 2 but couldn't afford it. Said it was fit for royalty. I paid for the entire thing in full, quietly, through a private event firm with no direct trace. I wanted no questions, no drama, just control. We invited the whole family, extended cousins, church friends, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. Cynthia RSVP'd yes, of course, with a smug little note about looking forward to a beautiful day. She assumed I'd gone into debt or used every last cent of my savings to chase a fantasy. She pitied me, I'm sure. Probably thought she'd swoop in when it inevitably collapsed and offer to fix it. I let her believe that in the months leading up to the wedding, I played the part. I pretended to reconcile, met her for coffee, let her pick napkin colors and argue about flower arrangements, nodded along as she gave backhanded compliments. I even let her believe she was helping pay for some of it, knowing full well her checks were being voided and shredded the second they arrived. I smiled. I listened. I let her think I'd come home. Meanwhile, Leo was working behind the scenes. Because here's the thing my mother never knew. Leo isn't just a brilliant entrepreneur. He's actual royalty. Not the kind with castles and tabloids. The quiet kind. His family comes from a small, peaceful duchy nestled in the Alps. His father is a duke, and Leo, by title, is a prince. Technically, he's His Serene Highness but he never cared about any of that. When we met, he never mentioned it. We preferred to live simply, without titles, without ceremony. But now it was time for a little ceremony. We weren't doing this to impress. We were doing it for effect, for clarity, for truth. I wanted the woman who called him a pool boy and a charity project to sit front row as he walked down the aisle, in a custom tuxedo, with his royal insignia subtly stitched inside the jacket. I wanted her to hear the priest acknowledge his full name and title. I wanted her to see the guest list filled with foreign dignitaries and tech billionaires. I wanted her to see asterisk who she'd tried to destroy. Asterisk I didn't need revenge that screamed. I wanted revenge that smiled politely and passed her the hors d'oeuvres. And we were just getting started. The wedding day dawned clear and golden. The kind of light that makes everything look like a dream. The estate shimmered in the early sun. White columns wrapped in soft florals, velvet aisle runners. A string quartet playing Bach under a carved marble arch. Every corner of the venue whispered elegance, grace, intention. White doves circled above the garden where guests began to gather, their wings cutting across the sky like silk. It was breathtaking. It was flawless. And it was mine. Every detail executed without a single contribution from the woman who thought she still ran the show. Cynthia arrived in a silver gown and a triumphant smile, practically glowing with satisfaction. She made her rounds, collecting compliments like currency. In her mind, she had won. Her daughter had finally come to her senses, finally planned a wedding worthy of the Morgan name. I caught glimpses of her posing near the flower wall, offering the photographer her best angles, slipping her arm into the elbow of whichever distant cousin was nearest. She looked like royalty. And then the reception began. The ballroom sparkled with candlelight in gold accents, the place humming with music and laughter. Plates of filet mignon were passed, champagne flowed freely, and the room felt suspended in time, waiting for the next moment that it came. The MC stood and took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling, "please rise as we welcome the groom, Leo Renaud, heir to the House of Clermont, son of Duke Etienne Renaud of Avermont." There was a beat of silence, then the gasps. A ripple moved through the room like a breeze over still water. People turned in their chairs. Someone dropped a fork, and Cynthia, seated right at the front, in her self-appointed throne of a chair, froze. Her champagne glass paused midair. Her lips parted just slightly, confusion blooming into disbelief, then into something closer to panic. Her nobody future son-in-law had just become a prince. I watched her face carefully, the way her features tightened, trying to do the math, trying to make sense of a reality that didn't align with the narrative she'd written. And then, in the quiet that followed, I rose from my chair. My speech had been printed, approved, neatly folded in my maid of honor's clutch. But I didn't read that one. I held the mic and looked directly at my mother. "Some people," I began, my voice steady, "measure a man by his resume, by his job title, his salary, his pedigree. Some people want boxes checked more than they want hearts held." A murmur moved through the crowd. I smiled. "I measure mine by his soul, his kindness, his character. I chose love over status, and I ended up with both." The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked, chairs pushed back as people stood. My friends whooped. Leo reached for my hand, beaming. And Cynthia? She didn't move. Her face was frozen in something between awe and horror, a porcelain mask finally cracking. Later, after the dancing had started and the music had swelled, I found her by the balcony. She was alone, drink untouched, staring out into the gardens, like they might offer answers. I walked up beside her, calm, poised. She turned, startled, searching my face for some trace of apology, some opening for control. I gave her neither. "You once asked if he was the best I could do," I said softly. She blinked. I stepped closer. "Turns out, He was better than you could imagine. And then I walked away. Toward the man I loved. Toward the life I had built without her permission. The band swelled. The lights dimmed. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Cynthia went silent after the wedding. No calls, no emails, no snide remarks passed through family channels. Just silence. And honestly, it was the most peaceful gift Ava had ever received. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to second-guess a text message, reread a voicemail, or rehearse a polite but firm boundary before every phone call. Her world quieted, and in that quiet, Ava finally heard herself think. She and Leo spent the next few months traveling, Florence, Kyoto, Santorini, not for the flex, but because they could. They wandered museums with no agenda, drank coffee on balconies with chipped railings,